voters would still vote Labour even if the economy did improve before the election. That's despite Sunak's consistent suggestions that economic revival would mark turning the corner and could see the polls narrow. Let's speak to the Master of Political Polling and Professor of Politics at Strathclyde University, Professor Sir John Curtice. Welcome to the show, Sir John.
Good afternoon to you, Ed.
So the economy is not going to save... Oh, good. I can see you on Zoom because, John, I have to ask you a question before we do this interview because I watch all your interviews on Times Radio. You do give your interviews in your front hall, don't you?
Correct.
Brilliant. Okay, I just wanted to check that. I think it's unique.
This is an Edwardian tenement flat, somewhat Macintosh style, not atypical of Glasgow.
Charles Rennie Macintosh style. You're going to see the eclipse tonight at 8 o'clock as well.
I think it's going to be far too cloudy and far too wet, Ed, for us to be able to see anything by that time of the day. But anyway.
Anyway, let's get back to the business at hand. The economy is not going to save Rishi Sunak.
Well, it might not, and history teaches us that it certainly might not. After Black Wednesday in September 1992, the economy began to enjoy its best period of economic growth in the post-war era, but voters did not forgive or forget the experience of Black Wednesday in September 1992 when the pound was forced out of the exchange rate mechanism. And the government had to put out the white flag on that. And the Conservatives fell to a very heavy defeat. We are now looking at a government that also has presided over a market crisis, in this case occasioned by the Liz Truss fiscal event, which has done similar damage as Black Wednesday to the reputation of the incumbent Conservative government for being able to manage the economy. Of course, at the moment, the economy certainly hasn't recovered. One of the other bits of information in the polling that you've just cited is that around half of us are still pessimistic about the future of the economy. Only about a quarter of us are optimistic. So the Conservatives, frankly, haven't even got to first base so far as people's perceptions of the economy is concerned. But even if they do, even if the public go, well, actually, you know what? The last 6 months have not been quite so bad as the previous 4 years because it has been a very difficult 4 years for the economy. There is no guarantee that the public will say, right, so therefore Rishi Sunak deserves some credit. Turning the economy around thing is one thing. Politically claiming the credit is another. And doing that may be difficult if the wider backdrop to your current position is one where the voters still have a memory that's ingrained on them, which is not to your advantage.
It was interesting you mentioning Black Wednesday and that being a sort of turning point for the Conservative government. And I remember it very well that, Ken Clarke, I think, did a fantastic job as Chancellor and delivered a great economy, and it did the Tories absolutely no good whatsoever. I was wondering, as you look at the polls, was there a Black Wednesday moment for this Tory government, or has it just been a gradual growth of utter...
there have been two.
Okay.
And the fate of this government was sealed in 2 6-week periods. Period number one starts at the beginning of December 2021, when the first revelations about Partygate and Boris Johnson's more liberal interpretation of the COVID regulations than pretty much anybody else in the country was first unveiled. And the second moment is indeed the Liz Truss fiscal event. On both those two occasions, the Conservatives lost about 6 points in about 6 weeks. Labour took the advantage. And at the moment, the Conservatives are 24%, almost identical to the 25% they were at in the immediate wake of the Liz Truss fiscal event. If you want to look to see who are the two people who are most responsible for where we're at, the answer lies in the two prime ministers whose downfall was a part of the history of this parliament.
That's a really fascinating answer because it allows me actually to ask a question I wasn't thinking about asking, but I will now, which is, and it's a message to all Tory backbenchers to a certain extent as well, your answer. You make the Black Wednesday happened and the Prime Minister remained, even Norman Lamont stayed for a bit. And so everyone kind of could blame John Major. There are some people in the Tory party who think, well, hold on, that was Liz Truss, that was Boris Johnson, we've got Rishi Sunak now. But they're also now thinking even, if you don't like Rishi, we've got another one in the back of the car. Do you...
Well, 2 points.
There's change...
2 points.
Yes.
There are 2 points to make, Ed. The first is that this, of course, is the first time amongst those governments who've suffered a market crisis, and of course Labour had more than their fair share of them. Well, the first time that a party changed its leader in the wake of that. And the hope, of course, was that Mr. Sunak, being at least relatively less unpopular than certainly Ms. Truss or by this stage Boris Johnson, would be able to turn things around. The problem is that rather than the popularity of the Conservative Party climbing back up to the relatively benign levels enjoyed by Mr. Sunak when he first became Prime Minister, his personal popularity has been dragged down to the level of unpopularity of his party. And indeed, Mr. Sunak on some measures now is even less popular than John Major was, 6, 7, 8 months before an election. So the truth is, changing the leader last time did not work. Now, contrary to that, of course, what you can argue, well, the Conservative Party was in deep electoral trouble in the spring of 2019. They turned to Boris Johnson, and that helped to turn things around. But the question you then have to ask yourself at present is, well, who is the Boris Johnson Mark II sitting on the Conservative benches? The person who is highly charismatic, a well-proven, effective campaigner who might be able to take this virtually near impossible situation and turn things around. And I would suggest to you, Ed, that it is not clear.
Well, it's Penny Mordaunt, John. It's Penny Mordaunt, surely.
Penny Mordaunt does not have the level of charisma that Boris Johnson enjoys. She is nothing like as well known as Boris Johnson was by the spring of 2019.